Welcome, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. In my case, it's good afternoon. How are you doing today, Versan and David?
Doing great.
Yeah,
Can you
doing
guys
great.
hear me well? Yeah.
All good?
Yeah, yeah, very good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to apologize
Glad
for
to
the
have the
delay.
two of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Versan was having some technical problems on the computer. Today we don't have Vandal, but we have the three of us, so we can kick in this thing. And I think there's a lot to talk. There's a lot of uncertainty in the markets, and I think we want to start addressing some key events that are going to happen this week. I think the first one that I got a lot of questions about is the 2nd April Trump's tariffs that are coming into action. I think that's going to affect mainly Canada, right, and the auto industry. So, which one of you want to start sharing some thoughts about these events?
Let's let David go. It's been a while. I want to hear his
Yeah,
thoughts.
Yeah, really appreciate that, guys. Well, you know that Canada is my native country and stuff like that. But when you realize that there is a massive difference between what is produced, like, in terms of, these trade deficits that are between these countries. And the tariffs for a lot of products that, Canada imposes, a lot of people don't realize, how significant they are. And I honestly think that, when you're talking about a reciprocal tariff situation, which is really what Trump is proposing, I absolutely have no issues with it. If they want to lower the tariffs, well, it's very easy. Just basically, Canada lowers their tariffs in the United States come down, and vice versa. But this is a big economic shift because we have for years and years and years have these trade deficits, being that the United States is the world's greatest consumer economy. We consume 80% of what the world creates. And so, there's been a disparity there. Now, we have moved away from it like in the 40s and the 50s. Remember, the United States was a producing country, like it created goods, it exported a lot of that, and on and on and on. Well, it's gotten away from that in such a big way that it's literally a vulnerability now for the country to have its dependency, on other foreign nations, and some of them not even, friendly states. And of course, we're talking about China and various other, Eastern blocs like that. So I do believe that, yes, there will be some short-term pain, but for long-term gain. You're seeing already some of the impacts of the tariffs. And some of those impacts, at least from a infrastructure point of view, bringing in, investment into the country, like the semiconductor investment that's coming into the country, all that kind of stuff. It is actually a strategic move to build up, the economic principles within the country, jobs, manufacturing, all that kind of stuff. But for certain, there's going to be market volatility as a result. Now, for me, when this market volatility comes in because of the tariffs, I'm looking at that as opportunity. Why? Because the fundamentals haven't changed one little iota in terms of like what this is happening, especially because we're seeing it. Okay, it's hitting the stock market, but we're mostly focused on this digital asset space. Right now, people are crying like crazy over, oh, we're not seeing price action, we're not seeing movement, we're not seeing this, oh, it's stagnant, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. I always throw out there, look, when we were at like 30, 40 cents for XRP, for instance, and I'm telling folks, listen, do you want to be accumulating now at 30, 40 cents or at 3, 4, $5? Well, obviously the best time to accumulate is in the greatest level of opportunity. You buy the fear. Well, right now people are crying over like the, $2 XRP. I personally believe that down the road we are going to see multiples of that. So when do you want to accumulate? Do you want to accumulate now when we're seeing, this weakness in the market because of the reaction to tariffs? Or do you want to accumulate when it's 20, 30, 40, $50? And so for me, it's not really scaring me. It's actually, I'm looking at it in a different lens, long term, that it will benefit. And I do believe that, and you've probably heard this, and of course, Versan would know this well. Gerald Salante, he comes out there all the time. He says, currency war, trade war, world war. It would not surprise me. We've had the currency war. Now we're going to get into a trade war over here. I mean, come on, we're building up to some major conflicts that will cause a lot of instability. But in the meantime, the infrastructure is being laid down for what the new world economy is going to be when all the dust settles and the ashes are all burnt, like when all that. And this is where I think is the highest level of opportunity, even though it's the greatest level of fear. That's kind of how I take
it. Excuse me. The pollen. I mean, it's very simple, really. We have to be mindful that the whole world, the global economy, is undergoing all these significant structural changes. Rising inflation, debt refinancing to rapid the advancement of artificial intelligence. We see AI disruptions, and April 2nd, you got to be mindful that also marked a critical economic turning point for the, no pun intended, when President Trump put those new tariffs to take effect, and that just sets the stage for a lot of the broader implications across financial markets, unemployment, currency devaluation, interest rates, all these other things. So I think the implications of new tariffs, certainly we're going to see some higher prices on goods and services, given the current inflationary environment. This also will worsen price instability. Trade war escalations, countries that are impacted by tariffs, particularly China, I think, because we get everything from China, they're going to retaliate with their own restrictions, furthering disrupting supply chains, what's already weakened by all the geopolitical tensions and the war that we're now starting in the Middle East. And of course, you can exemplify that with all the accelerated de-dollarization. So basically, nations are moving away from the US dollar. They're trading in other settlement currencies. And this is, again, of course, going to fast track the financial system, like what the BRICS has been talking about, this new blockchain-based payment system. And of course, we have XRP, XLM. These are technologies that are going to be in some way, form, or fashion through stable coins, gold-backed to a degree, or not gold-backed, maybe gold-pegged, I'll say, just to keep people from overreacting here. But again, the technologies are built for a multipolar system where there can be a level playing field. So all this stuff, even with tariffs, is to exemplify what's already in motion, et cetera, et cetera. That's all. Yeah.
Now, there are different angles to look for the tariffs. In my
Agreed.
case, I will start looking from the market perspective. And we discussed this last week, Versan. I think by the time the tariffs are going to be implemented, I think it's coming on the 2nd of April. For me, it means that the market's already priced in. So I don't think there will be further downtrend continuing because of the tariffs. Usually when retail investors, let's say, if we are talking about an event, there is a 99% chance that algorithms already priced that into the market. So the tariffs are definitely not a black swan event. It's not something that's going to crash the markets, but of course it has contributed for the correction that we are watching right now. In this case, I would be paying more attention for the 4th of April with unemployment announcement coming in. So I would not be looking so much what's going to happen on the 2nd of April. I think it can even come like a reversal, and markets can even go against what everyone is expecting. Now that everyone is expecting markets to crash further, perhaps there will be some more momentum for the markets. Now, we had very interesting discussions here when Bitcoin was above $100,000 and we were expecting a correction. We called for the low volume on the charts, and that's exactly what has happened. We had Eric Trump advising everyone to get into Ethereum when it was above $3,000. We know that Ethereum has been the more painful currency out there. So when I came out a couple of months ago and I said 80% market crash was possible, if you look for certain coins like Ethereum, it has crashed over 60% since then. So I can say that we have been very spot on our predictions. And I do believe that tariffs or trade war, nothing of that can change what's coming for the utility assets. The final outcome can be a liquidity crisis, for example, and digital assets like XRP and XLM were crafted for such a situation. So I'm absolutely not concerned about my holdings. If you ask me if I believe we can see lower prices for XRP, well, I can see that perhaps we can lose $2, but I think that's also a huge opportunity. I give like a 30% chance that we're going to have a further crash for XRP. And I think for the sake of making things very clear, I think that's a very excellent moment to get some XRPs. Not a financial advice. I'm just saying that
Mhm.
most people will be fortunate if they ever see XRP drop into lower levels. And I think that's going to be a great buying opportunity. If you want to know what's going on with the price, watch the volume. And right now, the volume is extremely low. So we don't really have a lot of certainty in the markets. Now, looking back at the tariffs, I'm personally not a big fan of the tariffs. By the way, later on we can have a look at the XRP chart. I can make some more predictions because I see in the comments and also before the live streaming, a lot of people asked me what I think is going to happen. Now, looking back at the tariffs, I'm not a big fan of the tariffs. I think ultimately the consumer pocket's going to pay for that. I think it's not great for Americans, not great for Canada, not great for Europe as well, as Trump said, perhaps a 25% tariff towards Europe. I know Canada is the US largest trading partner by volume, so that has a huge impact. And ultimately, that's going to accelerate the process of currency devaluation. If goods and services are going to become more expensive, that means that fiat currencies are continuously getting devaluated. So tariffs are not the black swan events, but tariffs do play a role on this transformation. I think that's further going to accelerate the process of the dollarization as well, because that somehow pushes like BRICS nations to trade and use gold to bypass the US dollar, for example. I think that has a broader perspective. As we always say, it's a multidimensional chess game.
Yeah.
And just to conclude on the tariffs, I think that's going to punish the consumer. So I don't see a
Yeah.
very great outcome out of the tariffs, honestly.
I,
Yeah.
I would like to comment on that because, in this respect, look, the average consumer is looking things on the very, micro level, how it affects them. Of course, I understand that we do. We look at it, okay, I'm going to the grocery store, I'm paying this much more for this, that, or whatever, or, this is costing me more, or, because of course, currency devaluation is going to be a big part. But I truly believe that strategically they are doing this with intention. Now, with Canada, of course, we've heard Trump say, he wants Canada to become the 51st state. Now, I don't actually believe that he's wanting to. I mean, ultimately, if it happened, I think he'd be very excited with that. But I think it's more about getting a unified currency for Canada or for North America. I think that's one of the goals here. I think ultimately what he's wanting to do is to create a situation that kind of makes it incumbent upon Canada, to because of their currency right now as being highly devalued against the US dollar because of the tariffs. I'm thinking that, what he's really wanting to see happen is a unified currency for North America,
Mm.
somewhat similar to the euro to some degree. Now, whether it's going to be, a US dollar, however, I really do feel that that's a big push in that direction. Now, on the macro level, though, tariffs in the way in which they're being used now, remember, these tariffs are being, this is a strategic play. This is not just, oh, well, we're losing jobs and we want to bring infrastructure in. No, this is like a tariff war is really what we're in here. And
Mm.
and it's happening on all fronts. It's not, of course, Trump is coming back saying, like you had mentioned there, at the 25% tariff in the UK. But you have to remember, or sorry, not just the UK, but in Europe, the the European Union, in terms of what it allows, what goods it allows, our manufacturers to produce over there, is like tariff to the nth degree, or not even allowed at all. And so there is a massive disparity, of course. And so thinking of it from that aspect, yeah, there are going to be, and he's laying it down saying these will be reciprocal. So I suppose if Europe wants to say, okay, we're not happy with a 25% tariff, okay, then drop your rates. And I think that this is leading up to, and remember, what is the infrastructure he's trying to bring in? Well, we know that Taiwan is where a lot of semiconductor production is. Well, just recently, the largest semiconductor producer in the wide world has come out and said they're going to put billions of dollars into infrastructure building semiconductors in the United States. Now, to do that, you need rare earths. Well, we also understand that a lot of negotiation and contract have been made, to have access to rare earth environment moving it away from China, which, by the way, corners the rare earth market right now. And to me, it's strategic because they're setting us up to be prepared for some sort of global conflict.
Yeah.
That's just how I'm reading into it. And I think the tariffs are, one of the actions that are happening, as we're in this, this very unstable geopolitical environment of what's going on. And, I think that when you look at it from a micro level, yeah, you're going to get a lot of people are going to complain about the higher prices of this and that. When you go to buy a Mercedes Benz, in the United States, because Mercedes Benz are made in Germany, imported into the country. And that's, there's going to be, a lot of people crying over that. And they're going to say, hey, there's unfair here because all the American made cars, they can offer a discount. All these Mercedes dealerships are going to cry bloody murder, on and on and on. But it's the strategic plan of because they want to drive them to capitulate on their end. Now, whether or not that will happen, we're going to see. But this has happened in every currency devaluation and literal shift throughout history, when it went from the British pound, to the US dollar, and even before that, I think when the Dutch were kind of like theirs was the world reserve currency kind of thing. We've seen that in every kind of play. So it'll be interesting to see how it all comes out. But I do think at the end of the day, there are some havens of refuge, if you will. And for me, this digital asset space represents probably one of the greatest ones, because you're buying these things, in my personal belief, at a massive discount in comparison to their overall utility in the future economy. And if these tariffs are going to push that, then I'm looking at it as, hey, this is opportunity. And, even right now at these prices, it is opportunity, because it's it is the, the utility, the fundamental utility of what we're going into. And don't discount how AI is also going to form a massive part of that. I hope, that helps to kind of give clarity there.
I mean, I want to make some comments too. I'll try to keep it short and concise, but really this is just a narrative to accelerate de-dollarization, despite what people think and believe. Because if you already look at the current trajectory and the aim for a level playing field for the monetary system, this is going to only fast track that. It's very clear. And we can also even look at what Trump just recently did. He signed an executive order to refinance the US debt. We told people this was going to happen. We were ridiculed. People were saying that, no, Trump's going to end the debt-based Ponzi scheme, neuter the Fed. In fact, he did the opposite. And the refinancing of the debt effectively confirms that they're going to print more money on the way. Now, here's where it gets interesting. To actually accelerate the collapse of the debt-based Ponzi scheme, which is why central banks all over the world are actively printing money to refinance their debt. That is going to actually crash the debt-based Ponzi scheme and inevitably transition us into a new digital system. So I think, like Edo said, compliments to Edo, the markets are already pricing in lower interest rates, you could say. And that's just a sign that inflation anyways was going to persist despite the fact that there's a rate pause. And I think that's just the overall narrative being sold to the public. And also, I think it's important for people to understand that Bitcoin, which is considered to be digital gold, which is a freaking joke. By definition, it's not digital gold because of how it corrects. And, you can see 80% volatility in there. By definition, that is not a store of value. But Bitcoin remains very tightly linked to the NASDAQ. And you can look at the charts, all right? It will confirm this for those TA guys out there, and just broader tech markets. So when interest rates are cut, risk assets like tech stocks and cryptos are going to surge also as liquidity floods into the markets. And conclusively, you got to think, if inflation runs hotter than we expected, we're going to see some sharp corrections. And that's what's being priced in right now. So you can look at this from many different avenues, if you will. But again, we come down to the same conclusion, what David was saying, and I'll try to keep it short again. It's just that the smart money, the wealthy, hedge funds, central banks, institutional investors, they're reading these signals very early. A lot of our listeners too. We're positioning ourselves in advance, and I think retail investors need to follow very carefully, and we can't afford to make mistakes anymore, and allocate assets into inflation hedges. And I think commodities is very important. And I don't think Bitcoin is, but XRP. We just had a very interesting discussion with Matthew Piepenberg, who really knows about this stuff. Turns out that there are things he can't talk about, which was very interesting. He told us off record, but they are telling people one thing and they're doing something entirely, which confirms a lot of what our community has been talking about for years now. Exciting times. Yeah. Every crisis presents opportunity. Remember that too.
I want to quickly read a comment, and I want you guys to make your personal thoughts on this one. So we know that last week, Saylor has announced $2 billion in Bitcoin purchases. Okay, so MicroStrategy is going to go heavy on BTC once again. Their average cost is now $67.5 thousand. So since he started buying 5 years ago, he's only up 20%. That means he's barely keeping up with inflation.
Mm-hmm.
For comparation's sake, the S&P 500 is up 135%, gold is up 85%, and Nasdaq is up 150% during the same time frame. And people are saying that BTC is a store of value. You guys want to let us know your thoughts on this one?
I think the first announcement we should make, and it's important to clarify this, that Michael Saylor is, I called him out the last time, and I got a lot of applause for this, but Michael Saylor, you got to look at the history of this guy. Mm-hmm. He also lost $6 billion in the dot-com bubble. How many times have we talked about that over the years on these sessions and these calls? So that's just one thing. But, here he is talking about this Bitcoin thing and investing in it. And again, we have to keep going back to the facts behind Bitcoin and the fact that the first red flag was with the National Security Agency. We also have to be mindful that the revolving door between Bitcoin, Tether, and the U.S. bond market propping its currency to offset the losses of bond sales from the BRICS nations, this unbacked printing press. So it's a Ponzi scheme within a Ponzi scheme. And it's, that Ponzi and ticking time bomb disguised as a financial revolution. Not to mention that the government strategically purchases Bitcoin through these companies like Mt. Gox, MicroStrategy, and that's how they're being able to, keep this system alive. But I don't think Michael Saylor is being very honest and truthful with people, and I think there's a goal here. And if you look even closer at Bitcoin, they continuously siphon wealth from unsuspecting retail investors who are absolutely naive about the situation and transformation that's happening here. And what are they doing as they siphon this wealth from retail investors who don't know anything? They're taking it and they're buying gold. It's true.
That is true. And, I remember when, Pompliano. So Pompliano, originally, he had no problem with XRP. I mean, back in the day, we were watching him. And even his image, he used to wear hoodies. He was really all casual and relaxed until being the fact that he was, former, investigative agent, let's just say that. But needless to say, they get him out there. They started putting suits on him. He started appearing on all the news shows almost overnight and being touted as a subject matter expert and all this and that. He got out there doing the whole Bitcoin thing. Max Kaiser, another big person that was propped up to pump the whole, Bitcoin narrative. Then you got Michael Saylor comes in. And by the way, remember, he didn't start buying Bitcoin until after the major moves in Bitcoin, like after 2017 and all of that kind of stuff, when we saw some major moves. And, he says, oh, well, our company, his company never made money anyway. But then it's going to go out now. It's going to, get into Bitcoin. Now they're all about Bitcoin. I mean, the company really does very little outside of their speculative moves in Bitcoin in terms of their percentages. And, Michael Saylor is coming out there saying, oh, well, he's going to put this risk bet on Bitcoin. Well, when he buys it and he comes out publicly and tells people he buys, he's usually buying it at the high. He's not buying it when it's low. And that says to me, it's like every time the price is way up here, wait until it moves up again. You're going to hear another buy from MicroStrategy when they go out and buy. And what they're really doing is pumping their bags, getting, as you just said, Versan, retail in there to just dive headfirst into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, what are they doing on the opposite end? Well, the opposite end, they've tramped all over Ripple and XRP, but they themselves, look at Mike Novogratz, are investing in XRP. And it's
Yeah.
a total deception.
Look here,
And I
don't look
think,
over there. Yeah.
yeah, and Bitcoin has been, it's been propped up, propped up, propped up. Now they got in a strategic reserve. They're going to use, like you said, they're going to go and buy it. The craziness of it is this: when they put it in there, they're locking it away. So
Yeah.
what does that
Doesn't
tell
make-
you? Like, it's like they're intentionally keeping the market, by keeping stuff, locking it away. What are they doing? They're withdrawing supply.
Yeah. Can
And
I add
I mean,
something real quick?
yeah, please, yeah.
I'm so sorry, guys. But just a quick thought for the listeners here. Like, if Bitcoin was such great technology, why the hell are they marketing the hell out of it, right?
Yeah,
Why do you
yeah.
have to go sell a narrative to the people that this is it, this is the tech, this is what?
Mhm.
And by the way, institutions aren't buying Bitcoin. Now, they do sell products on through Bitcoin, which like are
Mhm.
ETFs, which are designed to siphon wealth anyways. ETFs are for the masses. They're not for the 1%ers. All right. Just like the traditional systems. Sorry to cut you off, David.
No, you didn't. I appreciate the input, because the reality is this Bitcoin bubble. I mean, when you think of how few are really controlling Bitcoin, the collapse of Bitcoin could be so catastrophic that it is just mind blowing when you think about, and the exposure that they're putting a lot of people in. When you think of like that, it wouldn't take much. It'd only take about the collusion of 3 or 4 different holders to literally collapse the market and literally rug pull the whole system. I mean, that's really what could happen. And Bitcoin has been held up as this shining, but its technology is it takes way too long to transfer a Bitcoin. Have you ever tried? Sometimes you're waiting 30 minutes to an hour to get the actual transfer to go. Lightning Network does not work.
Yeah.
We know that for a fact. You cannot tokenize real world assets on Bitcoin. So there's no way it's going to be used the way in which we know some of these other assets like XRP is going to be used in terms of the infrastructure of the new financial market. So if you read the white paper of Bitcoin, it was never touted as a store of value. That was not what it was supposed to be. It was not supposed to become the digital gold. It was literally supposed to be used as a peer-to-peer means of transacting value. Well, it can't fulfill that. It cannot fulfill that. And so XRP comes along 2013, which can fulfill it. And a coordinated effort, you absolutely know it, attack against, this XRP ecosystem started off and in big, big ways. And we've watched it happen throughout this last 4 years with the whole lawsuit and everything like that. And the fact of the matter is, Bitcoin is very vulnerable. Look at the micro regulations. I think Tether is now being delisted from every platform in Europe. Is that not right? Like, when does that come into effect? April 2nd or?
It's April 2nd, I guess, and I have been receiving notifications. Actually, all the exchanges are urging Europeans to swap all of their stablecoins to MiCA compliant ones. In this case, they are pushing towards USDC Circle, which is regulated in Europe, is MiCA compliant. So yes, Tether is going out of business. It's going to take 48 hours until you are not able to swap your Tether anymore from European exchanges. So if you are in Europe, I do encourage you to get rid of your Tether right now. I think that's a strategic move. You don't want to have troubles down the road. There's absolutely
Tether
no
crashes,
reason.
Bitcoin crashes. Simple as
Yeah,
that.
there's absolutely no reason to hold a Tether right now. And I think we have to ask ourselves the right questions. And by that, I mean, what's the last time you have seen Brad Garlinghouse, Monica Long, perhaps David Schwartz publicly telling you to buy XRP? Well, they don't. XRP doesn't need marketing. Meanwhile, all of these experts that you mentioned before, David, and we're talking about the Michael Saylors, I think Pompiliano is one of them. I can quote also Mark Moss.
Natalie Brunell.
There are many. And honestly, if you have a gut feeling, you can see that there's an agenda, right? You don't have to be an expert, but I think anyone who has intuition, I think sometimes your intuition can speak louder than just knowing something, So have an example. Is one of them is Mark Moss. He has been making an open campaign against XRP, especially when it was 50 cents. And I remember I did some deep research on his background, and it turns out that Mark Moss is an angel investor for Ripple. So you start to ask questions why there's a massive campaign against XRP, or let's say why
Mhm.
Eric Trump hasn't said a word about XRP when XRP was 50 cents or when XRP was 60 cents, but he
Mhm.
tells everyone to get into Ethereum when Ethereum is above $3,000 and right now Ethereum is below $2,000. So you have to start to understand that the mainstream figures are not at your best interest. They don't want the best for retail investors, but rather they are desperate for liquidity. So
Sorry,
I
guys.
always say crypto is the
No.
greatest transfer of wealth. I think that's the greatest transfer of
Mhm.
wealth, but you want to be
Yeah.
on the right side of the history. You don't want to be the one that is giving your wealth away for the market insiders and manipulators. That's why I have to understand the fundamentals. I always
Um,
say it's is Bitcoin 2.0. If you have a currency like Bitcoin, which by the way is not a currency, they are only encouraging the masses to hold,
To hold it,
not-
not to ever trade it. It's insane.
or
It's
to take
insane.
profits, right?
Yeah.
They're not
oh,
telling
real
anyone.
quick, real quick. I told this story a few times. Vindel and I reached out to Mark Moss in 2022. We asked him very politely if he would come on the show and we can just have an open discussion. And he got very defensive. First thing, his response was really stupid to begin with. He said, "About what?" And we were like, "Okay, well, about the differences between XRP because we're seeing all these things, which we were going to bring up on the discussions as we have for many years, and we were going to talk about these other things, right?" And he was very defensive, very inconsiderate, rude, and he turned us down. We're like, "Okay." We reached out to Natalie. We got the same kind of response. So when we started to do the research and prove that some of these people were incentivized, it was my brother who actually discovered that Mark Moss was also an investor in Ripple. We also discovered that a lot of these people are indeed 100% incentivized. And your story about Anthony or whatever his name is, yes,
Anthony
he did
Pompliano,
180
yeah.
completely. Yes.
Completely.
Same thing with certain other people, even in the XRP community, who have turned to go work with Fox and portray a certain narrative, which is not anything what it seems. I don't want to name names, but you have a lot of nonsense going on. And I think it's, again, because people are incentivized for clicks. All right.
Mhm.
They'll have to
Well,
they'll say
beyond clicks,
they
some of
need
them
to
are
say for
actually
clicks,
getting
and
paid.
it's true. There's a lot of bullshit out there. And that's why, again, Vindel and I, we have a very small circle. We prefer not to talk to too many people in this space because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And they have an agenda behind it too. Our agenda is very simple. Yes, indeed. Vindel and I would like to make money. We do want to get rich, but that's about it. We're here to protect our families, our loved ones, et cetera, and our community as well. And if you have an open mind about these things, you're going to do very well. Seriously.
I agree. I think that, yeah, there's no hiding the fact that we're investing in this space because we believe that it's going to be a life-changing event for us financially. That's for sure. But there are a lot of people who right now are saying one thing, and this is why we constantly say it, like I've heard it on this show, we say it, we don't follow these guys' advice, we follow their behavior. Well, it's a bunch, when you actually see what they've been doing all along behind the scenes and the narrative that they've been throwing out there. And then and literally, this is the psychology of this market, which is massively manipulated. The herd mentality, which is controlled by the fifth estate and all the stuff that they put down and the paid FUD that comes out and all this kind of stuff. And then you actually go behind the scenes and watch what they're doing. You're thinking, okay, if that's really what you believe, then how come that's not affecting what you're doing? What you're doing this over here? Well, obviously there's an agenda on going down there. And like you guys, Judy and I, we don't take any sponsorships whatsoever on our channel. None whatsoever. And we have been offered, by the way, thousands upon thousands upon thousands. We could literally 10x our income by accepting a lot of these sponsorships because they offer you bagfuls of money. One time, one guy wrote and said, "I want to bury you in it." Can you imagine? Well, that right there told us, nope, we don't want that, because once they buy you, they own you, and you are going to toe the line. And for us, we're like, look, we'll pay the piper now so that we can say what we believe and why we believe it. See, you have to have an investment apologetic. What do you believe, guys? That's fundamental, but more so, why do you believe that? Question yourself. Why are you believing these narratives about Bitcoin? Have you really investigated it? Have you looked behind the curtain yourself? Or are you believing it because, well, you got Michael Saylors out there. How could all these big guys be wrong? Oh, this, and that. Now you got Larry Fink, the same guy that was out there saying not more than 3 years ago that none of his clients had any interest in any Bitcoin at all. Now they're pumping it out there like it's, cotton candy on the corner at the fair. It's truly insane. And yet that's what's going on. And so I think that, with respect to this space and that type of thing, you have got to start to focus on not the sentiment side of it, but the utility side of it as to what's going to actually play a role, a functional role. And we know that XRP is playing a functional role. With respect to RLUSD, we are getting stablecoin legislation is being pushed through the legislatures around the world like in lightning speed. It's because they want to take the US dollar was being propped up by the petrodollar not long ago, right? Well, now what are they trying to prop it up with? They're trying to prop up they want to convert it to the crypto dollar, where digital assets will be the underpinning to try and keep the US dollar as a world reserve currency. But they are debasing it by creating more and more dollars all the time.
Actually, there is some there's another side to what you're saying there. And if you actually do the research on RLUSD, and again, so many contributing factors, which I don't think we'd have time to get into, but anyways, RLUSD is, again, a tokenized version of the US dollar. So that's a liability of the central bank. And since they're the ones who issued that dollar on the XRPL, the stable coin, that's your central bank digital currency. That's your digital dollar. You can sugarcoat it all you like, but that's the fact. And the fact that most transactions around the world are still given in dollars, and you start to look at RLUSD, it is a lifeline to help evolve the dollar's digital influence as global de-dollarization trends continue. So if you really look closely enough, you realize that this is no doubt the USA laying out the groundwork for the dollar's survival, which could help the US actually manage its debt too. And final thought on this is that I believe we're going to see, and I said this many times, but all these currencies are going to eventually evolve into regional, local currencies throughout the world, which also paves the way for that level playing field technology, that neutral bridge reserve digital asset, whatever that's going to look like. We believe it's XRP. You could do the research, the same, we're not influencers for XRP. I mean, listen to some of the conversations we have. We talk about pretty much everything else that contributes to the transitions we see in the world, but the reason we emphasize XRP so much on these podcasts, including myself, Edo, and I speak for all of us, and my brother as well, it's not because we're pushing XRP. It's because if you do the research in any, economically, geopolitics, the digital traces and the infrastructure always come back to Ripple, no matter how you like to sugarcoat it. So that's the reality of the situation. That's why we emphasize the use case of XRP so much. It's not because we're influencing it. It's because every digital trace comes back to Ripple. And Ripple sells technology to banks, RippleNet, enabling the use of XRP. And hey, if you don't believe that, that's fine. There's a complementary relationship between the two, XRP and XLM. I'm still writing that paper on it, almost done.
Yeah, and all you have to look at, and you don't have to look too far, is see who's the greatest consumers right now and adopters for RLUSD. It's not retail. It's not retail. It's institutions.
Yeah. Edo, I haven't heard from you.
No, sorry. I have some issue here with my charger. Just give me a second because my computer is about to turn off. So I'm just trying to fix it.
Oh my God.
I think it's back.
It's been a day.
Because now the
I swear, I'm going to sell some XRP and buy you a brand new setup, man. That's what I'm going to have to do.
No, I sold the modem of the internet to get more XRP. That's why I had some connection issues. I'm joking, but that
Oh my
actually could
gosh.
have worked out.
Hmm.
Well, don't
Yeah.
worry. I remember liquidating stuff I thought I loved, man, to accumulate more XRP. Believe it. Oh my
That
gosh. I
was a great
mean,
decision. And by the way, I think we have to always do the opposite of what they tell you to do. I remember back in 2017 when I sold my car, I had I think I told this story already. I was nearly 18 years old, was my first car. And I sold that car to actually get on Bitcoin. And back on the time, everyone told me I was crazy. And I remember the Larry Finks and the mainstream experts, they used to say Bitcoin is a scam, don't get on that. And actually, that was a great entry for Bitcoin. Then they
mhm,
proceed to do the inverse, right? When it's not the greatest time to get on Bitcoin anymore, they are basically telling you to go all in and they just keep ignoring XRP. And they have this motto which they say Bitcoin is a store of value you should hold forever. And guess what? Now we are saying that uh, XRP has massively outperformed Bitcoin. If we look for the monthly chart or XRP versus Bitcoin, we're going to see that XRP is still above like 500% for most people. If you got
mhm,
in at 40 cents or 50 cents, even at some point, XRP was above 600% for the people who bought at 50 cents. And back
mhm.
there, everyone was telling you that XRP was a scam, right? So by doing the opposite of what mainstream media has been advising me, I have been very successfully financially.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
I
what
want to
it
share
seems
here
to
the chart
be.
with,
Yeah,
I'm
go
trying to
ahead,
share
please
the
share the chart. Because what I would say is people are missing, they're missing that because, of course, I remember feeling this myself when we were buying in 2020 and into 2021. I felt like, oh, wow, we missed it because remember the prior cycle XRP was like, under a dime, under a penny. And when we were buying it, the average price was 17, 19, 20, 20 some cents. Well, now looking back at that, people getting in now, they're thinking, well, I must have missed it because, the price was like average 20, 30 cents in the last run. Well, now it's like two, but I'm telling you, the day will come. I genuinely believe it. People will weep for these prices. So yeah, share your chart.
Yeah. Well, I think people should just stay away from market volatility, detach your emotions from market fluctuations. I mean, what the hell are you going to do in such a rigged and manipulated system until that transition occurs? Be patient. In fact, I think AI is going to take out 90% of the jobs in the next 10 years. And I think people should be more mindful about becoming more relevant to society as the AI systems are taking over those old, labor jobs, right? People need to adopt to a degree with the technology, not let the technology run you, but also find new ways to bring different streams of income. As this wealth gap continues to widen, as these transitions begin to occur, there are bigger forces at play here than just watching the price of XRP jump from $2, $3. Even if XRP was at freaking $10, I still tell some of my clients that it's still extremely undervalued compared to what's going to reflect that one day.
Mhm, mhm.
Again, I think people are not paying attention to the more broader economic forces at play here and focusing so much on all the nuances and the nuances. And that's what's holding people back from seeing the bigger picture. They don't pay attention. They don't understand certain forces are at play here. I don't pay
Yeah.
attention to that stuff anymore. 2022, I gave up on all the noise and the nuances. That's it. It's just too much. And every day you got some new guy coming to the XRP space who's saying, you don't know what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
I tell those guys, you want to talk about XRP, you want to talk about anything to do with digital transitions of blockchain, go back to 2012. Go do your research on Ryan Fugger. Go do your research on the Rothschilds. Go do your
Mhm,
research on the big banks and the financial institutions. I'll give you an example. Somebody is now putting out this narrative about Fed Now, instant payments. We covered that in 2023. Do you remember, guys?
yeah.
That's not new news. That's old, recycled, regurgitated content. I mean, every day somebody's saying breaking news. How can you break a story that's been broken many times over and over?
Well,
I
it's
mean,
new to them, you see,
integration has been
and
happening for a very, very
yeah,
long time. And if
it's
you
new.
can't see it, then that's it. You're going to get wiped out or weeded out with everybody else. And I'm sorry, those are the facts. I mean, I
Yeah,
speak
most
to
people don't
experts
even.
every day. and they agree with us on this stuff.
Yeah,
And I'm talking about real experts.
Yeah,
that,
Can
I
one
agree
of
with
I sent, sorry to interrupt you, David. I was trying to share the chart here, but it turns out I have to give permission, and for that I have to close the browser. So I send the XRP charts on the private chat. If some of you can share the screen, we can make some comments about the volatility that's coming. I want to share my strategy in case there is a major correction.
Can you do it, David? Please.
Is the last link sent on the private chat?
Yeah, it's okay. It says chart not found. Open this chart layout for you. I have to log in to do it.
Describe the chart.
So
yeah, just describe it. You know, tell. But I was just gonna say that if most people like to pick up on what Versan there for a minute, I'll just say this: most people don't understand who Ryan Fudger was, where Ripple came from, and that it came out of Canada, and it's been around for a very long time before it became to the current XRP as we know it today. And yeah, I would encourage people, you really want to peel back the onion, you go research it, go all the way back to where it came from, and then research Ryan's background. That will be an eye-opener.
I mean, the information is public. And by the way, I tried to open it myself. I'm sorry, I couldn't. It said I had to log in. So
yeah, me too.
But yeah, you know, the information's all out there.
It's because it's
yeah. But you know, I don't know if I said this. I think it was on my call with Matthew moments ago. But I think for all of us moving forward, we still should use physical gold as our proxy for wealth preservation. I know many people disagree with me on that stuff, but that's fine. I mean, if institutions are purchasing gold and central banks are repatriating gold and physical silver, something's going on there, right? We can understand the relationship between stable coins, and in the digital world, of course, physical assets are not going to have that portability, if you will, right? You can't move it around, use it for medium of exchange, but with stable coins and so forth, you're going to have gold and physical assets tokenized on the XRP ledger. The whole idea of issuance of stable coins, that's where this is all going, that intersection between the two. We've been talking about this forever, but I think it's important still, as we go into a digital economy, we need to have physical assets, guys. Certain people agree with me on this and many don't for some reason, but I'm telling you, everything else is, I think, being sold to people as a way out of, I think it's a way, people think it's a way out of the debt-based Ponzi scheme. Sure, maybe. But I think the only way to really get out and beat banks at their own game, and I've said this long ago, is that you have to own physical assets. That's the way you walk away from a controlled system. That's the way you walk away from a digital system. And just central banks authorities to begin with, because, I mean, that's what they're doing. And I'm just trying to be mindful of what the 1%ers are doing.
Yeah, why are the central banks betting against themselves by accumulating gold at record prices? I mean, gold is at an all-time high, and the demand for physical is out the door, and it's central banks buying it. They're betting against their own horse.
Yeah, and Senator Warren, 2022, 2023, Senator Warren was putting laws into place on behalf of Wall Street in order to, when that next bank failure happens, this is what Jim Rickards talked about in 2016 on also the book called The Road to Ruin, that if there was to be a credit crunch, a credit freeze in the system, that's an ICE 9 scenario. I'm sure people have heard about it. Who would be holding the bags of the U.S. bond market? The ones all of a sudden that no countries want, and it's the U.S. consumer. So people are still actively right now, even with Trump in office, and I hate to say that, okay? People are being robbed blindly, and very few people are seeing that. And I think the way until this transition occurs fully, and we have regulations that is going to bring the legitimacy of the technology we're talking about here, we have to be preserving what wealth we're working so hard to keep in our homes, and we want to keep this wealth, and you have to do that with gold. It's a proxy for wealth preservation. I think that's what I've been doing, and I'll tell you, I am significantly wealthier as far as owning physical assets, and sure, digital assets too.
Yeah, think about it this way: a person today can own more silver than some kings did in history.
Yeah.
That's a powerful thought.
Priced in dollars too,
Yeah,
commodities. And
it's
with,
truly
with
wild.
Trump now refinancing the debt too, we have to be mindful that when you price commodities in dollars because they're printing so much of it, and the LME and the COMEX about to hit a brick wall as we transition, there's going to be real price discovery with the technology. So, yeah. Sorry,
Indeed.
guys. I'm like hijacking
So
the
go ahead
conversation.
and talk about your chart if you can get it.
Yeah, no, I will not. I
Oh,
couldn't show
God.
the chat today. Anyways, it was not for TA purposes, guys. I'm not a huge fan of TA. There's a lot. I'm not saying support levels don't exist. It's just that the TA really comes from the central banks and the S&P 500, and it's a multidimensional chess game. You can't predict with lines on the charts. But the point I was trying to make is that I have said this multiple times. The markets aren't looking great right now for most crypto, but for cryptos like XRP, the XLMs, the H bars, which were the top performing assets this bull run, it's a different story. But most cryptos are sitting below bear market prices. I have covered this in several videos. I also pointed out for the liquidity issues on the crypto markets right now caused by the dilution, the excessive meme coin launches by celebrities, even by the president of the United States, that has contributed for a liquidity crisis on crypto markets. So if you ask me right now if I think there is a chance for markets going lower, what I want to point out is that first, nobody should wait to buy XRP. The best strategy, in my opinion, is to buy XRP and wait. So considering that you already have a substantial bag of XRP, and let's say you are looking for a new entry, right? I think you should work with buying orders on the exchanges so you can take opportunities in the case there is a flash crash, and that has happened multiple times on this bull run where you had XRP. There was a flash crash. I remember well to $1.76. There has been another to $1.90. So whenever you position yourself on the exchanges with buying orders, you have great opportunities for buying the asset for a lower price when there's such cases of a flash crash. And I want to ask you this question, guys. I'm going to also give my opinion before I ask you the question, but the question would be what you think is the worst case scenario for XRP in the case, let's say, the markets continue to face meltdowns as we are seeing Bitcoin dropping lower. We see also the S&P 500 not looking so solid right now, and we have a lot of volatility that might play out. And in my case, I think the lowest, I don't think we're ever going to see XRP at 50 cents again. I don't even think we're going to see XRP ever again at 70 cents. But I do consider that is possible, and I wanted to show that on the charts for people to understand better. But I think the lowest we can ever see XRP again is between 90 cents to $1.20, and I think that's where I have large buying orders on exchanges. And that's not a financial advice. I'm just sharing my strategy, and the people who followed some of my previous strategies, they were able to capture some flash crashes, and I think it would recover very fastly after that. So do you guys see what would be the worst case scenario for XRP? And by the way, before giving the word, I give that a 20% chance of happening. I'm not saying it's going to happen 100%. I'm just giving a 20% chance, and hence why I have some buy orders in the exchanges. If that doesn't happen, as I said, I'm already positioned accordingly with XRP. I don't think you should be waiting for that scenario to buy.
I mean, there are so many ways you could look at this. I think it's still important to understand that so far as what we've seen is that the crypto market seems to be coupled with Bitcoin. Okay. I think that's a big problem until regulations are in place. And it's interesting that Trump made that statement in his executive order about asset classification. The devil's in the detail. What is he referring to? And again, we know XRP is not a security. I think in time, when regulations do come in, compliance and so forth, we're going to see the right technologies emerge and eventually have to decouple from those that are non-compliant, right? So we're going to see some of that. And 2025 is a big year for regulations. But then again, being mindful that with XRP, unfortunately, still coupled with the Bitcoin and the traditional markets that we have. And like I said in the beginning, Bitcoin is coupled to the stock market, and the stock market derives its entirety of value directly from the bond market. That's the debt market. So if the debt market implodes and if we have some issues, but that's not going to happen. He just got permission to refinance the debt. So they're going to print more money. So it's very possible we may just be seeing a small correction before the market begins to pump upwards because of fake liquidity being injected into the system, et cetera, et cetera. The other way we can look at this is if we do see a black swan event, which means that Tether would ultimately collapse. But I don't think that's going to happen in any time soon. But if that was to happen, of course, Bitcoin would collapse. In fact, it would destroy the whole crypto market, in my opinion. And that means XRP would have a significant retracement as well, because it's still coupled to the bullshit, basically. And then from there, it would emerge from the ashes, if you will, as some people would describe it. So that's another way to look at it. And of course, there are other ways we can look at this. And again, I'm just offering perspective here because those are the facts, some of them.
Well, I would agree with that.
Speculation.
I personally think, absolutely, the debt market is the beating heart of all markets. Let's remember that this is where monetary instruments are created out of thin air. Every dollar that's ever been made, it's a promissory note back to the central bank. The central bank, is creating, its whole purpose, its whole existence is to create more dollars. So inflation's the name of the game. They are going to inflate. One big tell is they just increase the debt ceiling. Every time they do that, that means they're going to use that extra debt. So they are going to bring the liquidity into the now. There's no doubt about it. Will that affect the current markets? Yeah, of course it will, because you're right, the bond markets. I mean, you had Janet, who was actually saying out there, that, Janet Yellen, when she said, well, we're going to buy the bonds. Well, where is the government getting the money to buy the bond market? Well, they're buying it from the Federal Reserve, which is creating the money. Those bonds in turn, as the recycling of the monetary instruments goes, and all that finds its way into the markets. And the markets are, let's be honest, like you just said, crypto is connected to, the markets. It's just a fact. And Bitcoin is the king of it all. Well, the whole thing could come crashing down. Now, with respect to Tether, I believe their market share will be slowly diminished. I don't think they will allow the whole thing to collapse in an overnight collapse. So I don't think we'll see a black swan there. And by virtue of that definition, a black swan is an unforeseen event, right? Some of the most catastrophic things that could happen are not black swans. I mean, we could see that the world could be in a global conflict at any moment, really. They're leading towards that. That is not a black swan. You can almost see the handwriting on the proverbial wall of China moving into Taiwan, or something happening on those
the FDIC.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff could go down. And, if that happens, from a long-term point of view, because look, so many people in this digital asset space are focused on the micro minutia of the day-to-day, value of whatever it is. And they're looking at these things in just such short-sighted, in my estimation, terms. If you're looking at the day-to-day price action, guys, as far as I'm concerned, you're really setting yourself up to get absolutely wrecked. You're too emotionally attached to it in that regard. It's the utility, and that's what I focus on. It's because, for this whole system, and it will eventually collapse, they're blowing the bubble up till it does burst. Well, when it bursts, the same people who caused the fire are going to show up with the hose. They're going to show up with the answer. And so it's having that mindset. Now, I honestly think, in one respect, that we could possibly see a major pump, and I think it can happen in a relatively short period of time. Let's say 30 to 90 days. We could see some really amazing prices, but I think a crash is eventually coming.
I mean, it has to
after that crash. So I just think that's a reality. I think it is coming, and I think it is going to be what's going to reshape the financial markets going forward, just like the Great Depression did. Remember, it was after the Great Depression that a lot of these monetary policies came into play. Now, the Fed came in 1913, and it was the cause of the Great Depression.
Yes. Yes, it was a problem, reaction, solution. And that's their motto. And we've covered this so many times, but also it's important to not like just solely focus on these black swan events, right?
Yeah,
You know,
that's right.
just be aware of them. That's all.
Mhm.
And I was laughing for a while. Maybe you guys noticed, but somebody was saying that I'm a Bitcoin maxi under the blankets. You know, what do you think, guys?
Not even close,
Bitcoin
man.
maxi. Oh my God, I am so heavy on
don't,
hard
yeah, they
assets.
don't have any idea.
If I
But
had a
you know,
choice,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, if
yeah,
I had a
no,
choice, I wouldn't even be holding digital currencies. I'll be honest with you.
you'd be holding
Uh,
hard assets and gold.
I'd
But
only be holding hard assets.
yeah,
Yes.
I see gold and those type of things. Yes, they will have higher values. They will retain value. Just the ROI that I see potentially on these digital assets long term is so significant that I think it will outpace traditional commodities. That does not mean that I would not have exposure to those things for sure, right? Because, and I own some silver, I own some gold. The reason I say that is because you do have to have some sort of a hedge against the eventual possibility that other things could just completely collapse, and that's why the central banks are doing it. That's why they're doing it. And so I'm not against that for sure. I just think
Yeah.
long term, we're going to see the utility come out of these things.
There's another thing. You keep seeing this narrative recently about Swift and XRP. You know, we've covered this so many times, and again, we have to continuously reiterate ourselves, I believe, because we have new subscribers and whatnot. But you know, that adoption between the relationship between Swift and XRP in these discussions happened in 2016, 17, 18, and 19, and we reported on some of them in 2022. But the adoption between the relationship between Swift and XRP, that has been in motion for a long time. I think that either in the short term, they're going to be adopting RippleNet, which will enable them to use XRP too. We've heard Swift directors talk about this in the past. So once again, just outdated, regurgitated content. I had to throw that out there. But again, you know, there should be no debate about this stuff anymore. You either see it or you don't. And that's the reality of it. That's what Matthew was talking to us off record. We were talking about the whole Kool-Aid thing. People are taking too much of the Kool-Aid with this new whole Trump thing, and we're not going to get into that. But
Swift and Ripple are working
few people
together,
see it,
and
most don't. Yeah. Most don't. And we've covered how it's a complementary relationship between certain technologies. And that's your reset, really. It's your ecosystem. Each of these techs that we talk about all the time, I'll put them in the description for this interview. I mean, this discussion, but it's, each of them are servicing different niches in the global marketplace. So there's that complementary ecosystem as far as these technologies and what their purpose is, right? And that's where your reset is in the monetary system, blockchain servicing these different protocols. I mean, servicing these different issues. Yeah.
And you can
Anyway,
see it.
done.
What I would say this as a last I just wanted to give this last. Guys, one thing I want to throw out there is if you think that people think your XRP is not valuable, then why are so many people trying to scam you out of it? So many. If it has no value, future value, why are they trying to scam you out of it? Guys, be very careful in this space, because we've had folks on my channel that have, responded to people who have pretended as though it's myself with my avatar and all this kind of stuff. And they have literally, scammed them, got them scammed and whatever. And of course they feel hurt. They feel burned. Now we go in there, we try to take all that out, but look, we don't have, Telegram, Instagram, all this kind of stuff, WhatsApps and all that. I do not contact my community at all to solicit them for anything. If they have interest in anything that I'm talking about, they contact me, and then a dialogue happens. And it's usually by my website or at coaching@thedigital-outlook.com. But there are folks out there, they're looking at your XRP and they're wanting it. They're coming for it. That right there is enough to tell
every
you
industry.
That's
true. Just scammers are always on the rise with AI, and they're using AI systems now to help advance their what they're doing, how they're reaching out to people. And yes, I mean, I will never use WhatsApp. I don't use Telegram. I don't use Discord. You'll never find me on Facebook. Okay. I try to minimize how much social media I'm involved in. I stick with X. I got my YouTube channel, and my website is the only way you're going to reach me or my brother. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, I want to point something out. Can I reply to a comment here? So you got Pat Wilder out there. Let's just point him out. Oh, this is nonsense. There's scams for almost every coin. I have never seen as much FUD thrown against any other ecosystem as I have for XRP. I mean, it is beyond belief. And we've been in this space as content producers for a long time. That right there, having folks get into our discussions and throw that out is a good indicator for me that you're on the right track with XRP, because you got guys like that who'll come in and try to make it seem like, oh, it's nothing, it's nothing. Yeah, you run a channel and you see how much FUD comes XRP's way versus every other asset. It is unbelievable. Yet, since 2013, the entirety of the time that XRP has existed, never, not once has it ever left the top 10 for market cap. Not once.
Yeah.
And that is a big tell right there. So,
And
yeah, I'm going to silence this guy in about 10 seconds.
final thing, I swear, and I'll let Edo take it because I have a call in 10 minutes, but somebody said fake
Yeah.
women on Twitter on X. And it's true. There was one night I was like, using X, and I'm not kidding. I don't know if I should say it, but a porn star reached out to me. I was like, what the hell is this? Turns out it was a fake account. And obviously I blocked that person, but someone said I'm stoned. I'm not stoned. It's just the pollen is affecting my breathing, my eyesight right now.
People are crazy.
Smart.
By the way,
But
on
idiot.
X, so that's how they operate. If you comment something on X, they will have fake accounts of beautiful models that are going to ask you questions about XRP. I mean, you guys got to wake up to these things. It's all fake accounts. I mean, they will come with generic questions. And by the way, last week, me and Versan started the turning point, and we took the initial 10 minutes. I promise. If you go back to watch the previous live streaming, we spent 10 minutes telling people to be careful with scams. 2 days later, I got a DM. I'm not going to say the name here, but someone sent me a DM, and he basically got scammed out of 26,000 XRPs. Basically was his entire bag. It's more than $50,000 because he got scammed by someone pretending to be myself on Telegram. And the guy said that he even watched our show where we say this exact same thing, that people should be careful. So you guys have to be extremely careful. I mean, it's not only enough to watch us saying this, you have to take the necessary actions, block the fake accounts. If ever trying to reach us out is through the website, through the official accounts, but please be very careful. Make sure you find the verified badge, for example, on X. If you are on YouTube, they also reply to the comments. So let's say you drop a comment to our videos, they will come out with a fake username. They will change something very small. They will use the same picture, and they're going to say, oh, send me a message, and they're going to drop some number, and they will try to make you invest on some fake platform. Be very careful with that.
Well, real quick, do me a favor, Edo. Next time we do this, I never want to see XRP World on this platform ever again. He's been leaving nothing but stupid and negative comments throughout the whole thing. And it's funny, his username is XRP World. Are you for it or are you against it? Which one are you? But just negative, stupid comments. And, I'm at a point, guys, where in my life, I don't tolerate stupidity. I don't tolerate ignorance anymore. I don't have time for it. I don't think none of us can afford it. So I never want to see him again.
He is banned. He is banned. Yeah, it's a shame because
I don't like idiots.
It's a shame because the people who we banned from the conversations, they lose a lot of great comments and they lose a lot of opportunities. Honestly, if you have been watching us for the past more than a year, 2 years, I think we have been spot on everything we have said about staying away from Ethereum. What's the worst performing asset right now is Ethereum. We told you to
and
get
there's a difference between negativity and stupidity.
It's just bullshit. We cut them off. It's a shame. They can watch Michael Saylor. They can watch other influencers out there. We don't really care.
Yeah, go watch someone that's gonna put pixie dust up your ass. I mean, that's fine, but don't come here wasting my time. And I put a lot of energy and time of my own into the research, into the comments, into everything I do here. So I don't mind negativity, but when you go too far, I have a very hot temper. I will throw you out of there. Okay. So anyways, I gotta go, guys. I have a call in like 10 minutes. So I really appreciate the audience. I appreciate all the support, and always a pleasure to see you, David. And I hope we can do this next week, and maybe Vendel can join us. Edo.
Yeah,
You
no.
guys can take care of the conversation if you'd like, but I gotta go. All right.
Yeah,
Have a good
okay,
night.
Jed, and have a good night, man.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Love you guys. I love the community too. All right. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, loves.